We're waiting for you. Give me time. All right. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, since tonight's a work session, I'll turn it over to President McCardle.
Okay, tonight is going to be the budget work session. We're going to go over the, hopefully most of this, all the makes and breaks that made up the city here. First, I'd like to thank the mayor, Stephanie, and all the department heads for the hard work they did in making this be a balanced budget. I know it took some time. And I'll just turn it over to Stephanie. She wants to, she said she's going to start out by going down line by line.
Huh? What?
Oh,
Really?
here.
Oh,
That one's Jeff's, that one's Steve's, this one's yours.
Hey, maybe we should get the point.
That was your plan.
I have you to roll.
You're talking too much over there.
Hint, hint, hint.
It's a little talking too much on that
Trying to get things to move on.
Planning and zoning had a call.
I meant to pull Susan's by accident.
It's called the left side, or on the other side.
Now that hurts a little. So I was going to make a comment, Mayor, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
And Stephanie had sent this, obviously worked well into the evening on Friday night, getting this put together for us, and kind of gave a little bit of a roadmap. And I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder or not, kind of where you started and.
That's all I was going to walk through. You're welcome to take whatever part under you want.
No, go for it, because the only thing I wanted to comment on is I helped with some of this, very little, but I was in on a little subcommittee, and we had more projects and more uses than we have revenue. So to say that the majority of the people that are associated with this budget probably saw a haircut. So I just wanted to say that it wasn't anything personal. It was basically, it came down to limited revenue and a lot of projects and expenses.
And when you started, we were something like 1.4 million over the budget yet that had to be cut out.
And that's when I got involved in, and I can see before that, we
started at 5.7.
5.7
million when we started.
Yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to make that comment that everybody's going to probably feel a little pain through this.
Well, and unfortunately, with the times that we're in now, it doesn't seem to be getting easier or better. After we proposed this balanced budget, now we've gotten more news that one of the capital projects that we've pushed off for 2 years is now 300,000 more or 250? 300,000 more than what we budgeted. We just got that information today. So I'll go through that with you too. I'm going to caution council as we move forward we've been pretty conservative in our revenue projections. We're keeping the contingency at a higher level than maybe before last year. Last year it was high as well. I think that's necessary if you look at the way our projects have come in this year. Yeah. Yep, I will go over that when we get there, so everyone hears the same thing. So I don't want to cut back that contingency too much, just because it seems like, just like this request, we just we'll estimate a number and it will change so drastically in such a short period of time. I do think we're going to need access to that contingency amount next year as well. It's hard to forecast. We do our best to plan, but when you see something go from 250 to 550 or 600,000 in a period of 6 months, that's hard to accommodate. So
What do you have currently, what do you have contingency?
same as last year, it's on your cover sheet of your fund overview, and I'll go through that
Okay.
too in a minute if you guys would like.
Yep.
I did not cut it back from last year just specifically because we don't know what's going to happen.
And have we used last year's?
My current estimate is pretty darn close. I can pull that up actually.
Keep in mind, we
Can
still
I-
have 3 months to go.
Yeah, right.
Almost 4.
I think before we get too sidetracked, Kevin, why don't you go and give your opening remarks, and then let's ask some questions, because
Yep.
otherwise I'm.
Yeah, and maybe somebody could just
No, you're
explain
okay.
exactly what we're going to try to accomplish tonight.
Right.
Yeah, that's where I was starting.
That's where you're starting?
If you'd like
Okay.
to go back to the beginning.
we're all.
So the intention for today is council just received the proposed budgets on either really late Friday night or Saturday. And so the intention today was just to walk everybody through kind of what is included in those requests. Maybe highlight a couple things that would be new for this budget year, which includes employee change requests. Give you a basic overview of what is and isn't included in the capital projects requests and where the subsidy applications are currently plugged into the budget, knowing that now is the time that council would make any changes that you would like. Further, we have a couple dates set aside here. Going through previous budget sessions, typically we're not starting those hearings until October, but we are getting this to you early. So I have quite a few dates set aside there. November 7th and 21st are the official hearings on the budget. But we also have some upcoming, obviously we have the work session today. If council would like additional meetings in September, we could do that. Otherwise, we could just set those for October. I would like to know tonight, at the end of the meeting, kind of what you guys are thinking you want to set aside for those work session times. This first time, I would assume we're just going to be walking through what those requests are, giving council time to digest, come back with discussion list, and what items you want to have further discussion on. Likewise, if there's something tonight that council says, Stephanie, we want you to go and put together A, B, and C, then that will give me time to make sure I'm getting that information put together and ready to present to council as well. As with all the other previous council budget sessions, I had some questions about when our subsidy is going to present. We changed that about 4 years ago, where they only come in and respond to questions from council. We don't set aside 10 or 15 minutes for each one to do a presentation. So that was spelled out in the application for anyone who applied for subsidies, and they were told that those hearings would take place in October with the final action in November. As far as the departmental request, we are happy to say that we are proposing to council a balanced budget. It did require us to do quite a bit of additional reductions with department heads last week, right up until Friday afternoon. I think we took another $800,000 out last week because your department heads are very good at keeping the operational costs down. After we plugged in wages and benefit, those increases, then really the reductions come from capital requests, and that's just a matter of prioritizing one requester over another. We did try to focus on some of the requests that have been cut out in previous years. We have reduced over $2 million in requests in order to get to that balanced budget. Like I said, it did require departments to have a prioritization of their requests. We did ask them to bring those to the meeting that the mayor and I have with each of the department heads as well. If an item had been previously discussed by council and approved, we did plug those into the budget first. Some examples, or if we had a project that's been ongoing and we needed additional funding, we plug those in. I guess a good example would be the rec center remodel. We had $250,000 in the budget for this year. Some of that's been spent on the design. We do know we were short $250,000 to finish that project, but it's going to be construction over 2 years. So we added the balance of that project into the 2023 budget. Spruce Street crossing, another one of those good examples of costs that keep going up. We have money in the budget this year that we're going to end up rolling to next year, but now those costs have increased an additional $320,000 that we had to budget into this year. And then we have the ambulance replacement, the chassis replacement, where we're taking our old ambulance boxes. Marius, I'm sorry if I'm using your wrong terminology, but we take the old boxes off the ambulance and we put them onto new, the new chassis for the ambulance. We had 225 that we transferred out of our future capital projects funds into EMS to do it. The total cost is $300,000. It is likely not going to be done this year. We might have part of the expenditure, but it sounds like we'll have the final payment in 2023, right?
Correct.
Okay, good deal. So we put in the balance of that as well. From there, we considered the individual department priorities and which projects or requests require general fund subsidies because, again, our goal was to present a structurally balanced budget. As far as revenue projections, the good news is we do appear to be on track to hit the 2022 revenue budget, which is great. I did take some of those increases from last year and this year and plug it into the 2023 budget. So this budget is predicting $11,800,000 in sales tax collections for 2023. That is a $400,000 increase from the 2022 budget, but it is below last year's collection levels. Now, if collections stay up this year like they have so far, just like in previous years, council at the end of the year can take some of that revenue that was received above budget and commit it to a project for next year. We can do the same thing in 2023. What we like about doing that is that we're not counting on money that we can't be certain that we're going to receive. Instead, we're spending that money after we have the cash in hand. The other thing is, if we put our revenue projections higher, then we have to anticipate we're going to use more of our contingency because some of that might have to be used to offset any revenue shortfalls from what the budget projection says. As far as property tax, we do have in this current budget $239,756 in property tax increase. That's for the 3% CPI as well as the growth that we had from the county auditor as of last week. The growth number that they gave us did not include utilities. We did get that number today, so I'll be able to increase that a little bit based on those utilities. And then another big unknown for the city is we are currently open in negotiations with our 3 union contracts covering all but our management employees. Depending on the outcomes of those negotiations, either some of the budget might need to be adjusted to reflect the outcome of those negotiations.
And where does that money come from if it has to be adjusted?
Elsewhere in the budget. So it's either going to be a reduction in contingency or removal of other capital or project request.
If
Go ahead.
any of the unions go to impasse, what typically, and you never know the timing of it, but generally, it probably won't be before November. when we have to do the final budget.
I can't answer that. I can tell you that we have scheduled another session with all 3 unions coming up before November. We have them coming up before the second meeting in October. I'm hopeful that we can make more progress, but I can't really speak to that in an open session about where we'll be at. So it just depends. Right now, we're pretty far apart, so we'll see how much progress we can make in the next meeting. So I can't really speak more than that in open session. One thing council had said or the direction I had gotten from council previously was that you did not want to see any new full-time employees in the budget. We had been operating off that for quite a few years. So I did call attention to 3 new requests that we have in the budget. First one would be community services. Originally, they had proposed adding a new full-time bus driver. When we met last week with department heads and we got into discussion about the hours that they're trying to cover in community services, they revised that request to be 2 part-time bus drivers, but they will be more than 20 hours a week, but less than 30, so they'll qualify for South Dakota retirement. The hope that they have is that might allow them to schedule those positions to meet those higher demand hours that we aren't currently getting our full-time or part-time bus drivers to take. The second request comes from the fire department, and you've seen this, I think, 3 years in a row now, and the request is for 2 full-time firefighters. I did give you a cost increase on each of these. On community service, that cost increase would be $65,126. Typically, that would be general funds supported, but the community services department, but we are still spending down some of the ARPA money that they have. With that one, though, Jessica will be able to apply part of the money as grant money from the DOT, and then they also showed some ride revenue to offset that. As far as the firefighters, that comes down to right about $103,000 per employee. The issue that we're seeing in the fire department is that we have several times where our minimum staffing is five people. We have 7 people per shift. Our minimum staffing is 5. If people are gone from shifts, so if we start with 7 and 2 people are scheduled to be gone and we're at 5, and now we get an ambulance call, we're down to 3, and we're really not having the ability to refill those 2 positions. Either people are not taking them, or we're having too many back-to-back calls, so we have times when we have the station not minimum staffed. The hope is that by the addition of the 2 full-time fire departments, or firefighters, that we'll be able to reduce overtime and ensure that we have less times where we have less than the minimum staffing needed.
Did we ever figure out how much we spent in overtime at the fire department last year?
I don't have that yet, but I would have that on the list of items. If you guys are interested in talking about the employee positions, that's one of the things that we could bring back to you. What we really wanted to do is in August and September, we started off our schedule by backfilling those positions back to 7 right off the bat, so we could see how that affects operations and compare it when we don't have those extra 2 people on shift, so we have a little bit better data. So I would assume by the time we're into October, we'll have some really good comparison, but we can always run the overtime for you from last year as well. We also have applied for I think it's called the SAFER grant.
Correct.
SAFER grant that would fund those 2 positions for the first 2 years, and then by the 3rd year, you're funding it 100%, but we don't hear back from that. I don't even know, do you remember, or did we get it turned down already?
No, we have not heard back from them,
Okay.
and we have not been turned down, so
Well, that's
it's
good.
still an option. The bad part about it is there's no drop dead date, so to speak, that
Oh, great.
we'll know. So this is the bad part. This could be fully funded, but we wanted to go this direction just in case.
And then the 3rd position change request would be for the personal trainer at the rec center. We created this position, it would have been 3 years ago now, I believe. Maybe, 3 years ago. And at the time when council approved the position, they wanted it contingent on the continued grant funding from Sanford. The Park and Rec Department is asking that contingency be removed. We've always had it on the salary resolution as part of the job. When the person was hired, it said it was contingent on continued revenue from that grant. So that won't necessarily be a budget impact unless we lose the Sanford grant, which that's about $15,000 a year it would cost the city. It's not adding another employee, it's just removing that contingency and potentially making it funded even if we lose the grant funding. So, but
Because at this point, the grant has ended, is that correct?
Yes. Now, they've been told verbally it's going to continue, but we don't have the contract in hand or the letter in hand. And my understanding is the staff just would really like to see that removed so that the employee who's in that position doesn't have to wonder if the grant funding is going to come through for that new grant period.
From what I hear, Sanford does their budgeting like the first of the year, so they won't know until the first of the year.
And
They say they're going to get it,
Yep.
but nothing's for sure.
And my response to the department when they asked is, when council approved that position, they approved it with a contingency attached to the job description, attached to the position. So if it's going to change, it has to come back to council for approval. I'm not going to remove that without you saying, yes, Stephanie.
How do we go ahead, how do we go about doing that?
You would tell me to take it off, and I would take it off of the resolution.
Thank you.
And then you would also maybe want to eliminate the grant funding, because right now, if we didn't get the grant funding, you wouldn't have the salary expense. We have the $15,000 plugged into the Park and Rec revenue, so you may just need to be aware that either that's going to come from general fund if you don't get the grant, or you just remove it and don't count on it.
Do they do the grant yearly, or do they do it for 3 years?
3
in a
years.
row?
I believe 3 years.
Okay, so we would know sometime in January.
By that time, hopefully.
Yeah.
And we do the salary resolution in November. So yeah, if you don't get it in January, you can say, Stephanie earmarked $15,000 out of contingency.
There you go.
But it's a council decision, not a department head or my decision to make. Capital requests. Unfortunately, that's really the only area that we have to go to reduce budget for. And I guess I'm just going to start by saying, you know, our requested budget was $77,319,076. A lot of that is utility projects, but if you look at the proposed budget, we have reduced over $2.1 million of capital requests. Those are things that are necessary for day-to-day core governmental services that we can't fund because we don't have the revenue to fund. If you were to go through, and maybe we'll do this just a little bit, I gave you a sheet that, yeah, that's great, isn't it? My mouse never works the way I think it should. If you were to go through this list, you'll see what is and it isn't included. Why is that not going over farther? Okay, hold on. Justin's not here to fix my scrolling. I don't know what I'm going to do without him here today. I might have to call him and have a legal.
Joe's right next to you.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know why it's not scrolling. Yeah, we're good. So when you go through here, you'll see the requests that are under here, but only the ones that have the X's made it to the capital budget. So you'll see we removed the pedestrian activation buttons at Spruce and Cabela. We removed the side street cameras at First and Sanborn. We removed First and 7th signal lights. That was one that you heard about during the budget works, the major capital project discussion at the last meeting. We actually had to remove that in order to balance the budget, so that's no longer in the capital budget. There we had several equipment requests, including a forklift. We have crosswalk signals, paint striper upgrade. Oh, this is a transfer switch at the Department of Public Safety. That is an item that we know is going to have to happen, but we just couldn't put it into the budget this year. We didn't have enough money. We've got truck, skid loader, dump truck, fuel system upgrade. We have $300,000 in there. We're short $300,000. So if we're going to fund that, we're going to have to add more money. Otherwise, that one's not going to make it as well. Here you've got, we had some improvements that were discussed also last year during the budget process, but we removed them in order to balance at the cemetery, doing some upgrades to the building, the siding, insulation, windows, carpet. I'm going to make this bigger so we can make this bigger so you guys can see better. Here's another reduction was the another vehicle that was removed, floor scrubber was removed. Putting AC in the Hitchcock Park Shelter, we talked about that last year as well. We had to remove it again this year to balance the budget. Pickleball courts, the city's match for that's been removed so we can do the park equipment. We had an equipment trailer, skid steer loader, cradle points for the bus at Transit. And then the phase 2 of the master plan for the golf department. The only reason why I bring those up is when you'll hear that we made some recommendations to reduce the subsidy levels for some of our subsidy application. Each year we're cutting, $1.5, $2 million in capital requests out of the general fund budget. Eventually that's going to come back where, we can't just keep pushing it down the road 4 or 5 years all the time, right? At some point we have to fund some of those items. Often it's when we have catastrophic breaks. This year we had the water heater go out in the outdoor pool, so we had to replace it. It was $50,000. We have the other half of that budgeted this year so that we get that replaced as well. And then of the subsidy applications, the city received $682,250 in subsidy requests for 23. That's an increase of $121,960 from the 2022 budget level. There were recommendations in reductions to those applications. So of that requested 682, the committee recommended approving 546,000. Some of those reductions were made or recommended due to some of the subsidies seeing significant growth and fund balance above what the city's annual subsidy amount is. So if our subsidy is just being added to that fund balance, the recommendation was to reduce some of those. But primarily, the reductions were just so that we could try and do a few more capital requests for this year. I do want to show council just a quick, I'm going to make this a quick glance at our fund balance overview. So this budget, when we received our first request, we received $125 million worth of requested expenditures. And as you can see, our revenue was $5.7 million short of funding that. We did go through the process and made some reductions, and you'll see now the budget is balanced. The budget anticipates that we would be applying $1,789,743 from cash reserves. That includes $1.675 from general fund. $1 million of that is the funds that the city currently has earmarked for the matching funds for the jetty construction project. The $675,600 is restricted funds in the general fund for STIP projects, the road projects that we get state funding for. So none of that is coming from reserves to balance our general operations. It's all coming out of designated money for specific purposes. E911, we'd be applying $115,000 from reserves to balance. That's using some of the money that they got in from ARPA for the reimbursement of their wages. Community services, we'd be applying $159,000 from reserves. Nutrition, $54,000. Water and wastewater kind of look a little wonky. It says we're adding money to reserves, but that's just because we have projects and debt service that'll be coming out of there. So we won't end the year looking like that. It just looks like we're going to end the year that way. Sanitation, we're spending almost 1.5 from reserves, but that's going towards the recycling building that they'd be constructing. The total cost of that building is $2.5 million, and they're getting a grant for that. Golf course, it would anticipate applying $90,000 from reserve. That's a conservative estimate of what they would have available in cash to balance their budget. Campground would be applying $77,500 from reserves. And then EMS is $300 from reserves, and that's largely the money that we transferred over to them for the ambulance replacement. If you're interested in seeing what the breakdown of each of those funds are, if you look down under the other cash applied, it tells you exactly what we're applying cash from. We are not using any of the future capital projects funds towards the lake project, as we discussed, except for the EDA matching grant. As we discussed at the last work session, the intention would be to apply for an SRF loan. And so when we did the lake budget, we just put the revenue from the loan in to cover the costs of the construction. The debt service payment that you'd be making after the construction is completed, you could use some of those funds for the debt service payment. But that way, if council decides not to move forward with that project, there's no revenue. You won't have the revenue to be able to do the project. So if you're saying no, you're stopping it, basically. You can see a breakdown of the STIP projects there, what those annual costs are for us. We have $1.225 million in those project costs. We estimated $550,000 in revenue, and the balance would come from that restricted account in general fund for those projects.
Stephanie, on the CARES Act fund, like 6 months ago, there was $2.5 million in there. Is this in here somewhere?
Are you asking about the restricted funds for, okay, that's over here.
Okay.
This is just what we're using in the budget right here.
Okay, right.
And this CARES Act funds is for community service for the money that they got in for their wages from grants during COVID. Same as 911. They got money to offset the cost of their wages during during COVID. Yes, thank you. Sorry. And so if we're just using some of those funds up that we received in grant funds for those two specific purposes. Down here is our assigned cash. So those are currently restricted funds in the general fund. We would anticipate we'd have $300,000 left in the STIP funds. We'd have $4,429,837 still sitting in that future capital projects fund. There's about $43,000 estimated remaining for Veterans Park. And then if you remember when old Casey's property sold, they donated that money back to the city, but said it needed to be used for the streetscape. So we have money dedicated in the entertainment tax fund for the streetscape. So potentially that could be applied towards the project next year. And then you can just see the other estimated cash balances over here on the right. I guess if I were to look at one thing that makes me maybe a little bit nervous, you know, I want the campground is a little bit different. The budget this year is higher, you'll see. Is higher, so the revenue is budgeted at $683,000 and the expenses are budgeted at $760,500. But that's because we got a FEMA grant to construct that storm shelter out of the campground. So I think that we're going to have $77,000 in that campground fund. But if we don't, they would not be able to do the boat lift next year, and they'd have to wait another year because we would want to get that FEMA grant done first. So we kind of had that discussion internally that if the cash isn't sitting right, that they need to hold off on the boat lift.
So just to be clear, the FEMA money, we haven't received it yet?
No, we've been approved for it. The thing that wouldn't tell me if we're going to have enough cash is it just depends on how sales go next year in the campground. And they have a plan, or Kevin has a plan for making sure that we're collecting sales tax after we get our rates and things like that to make sure that we have the balance available. But it's just something we're going to have to watch next year to make sure the cash is there, since we're anticipating applying it from reserves to balance. And if it's not, then we just wouldn't do the boat lift right away. We know there'll be at least 60,000. It's just the 77 is kind of maybe out there just a little bit. So that's the overview of kind of where we're starting. I guess a couple other points too. We do have more in transfers out than what we normally do. I did not do the big review that I usually show you guys because I wanted to wait till we're a little closer in. Oh man, I wonder why it's not letting me. I do. I don't know. I can't go over. Okay. Can I see your sheet?
Sorry. So where are you going?
I'm going to pull up the transfers out just for a few comments here. If you wanted to look, if you're in your big book on page 13, you can certainly pull that up. Oh, excuse me, it's on page 14. This is the money that we transfer out of general fund to support other funds. Our transfer out to park in 2022 was $2.7 million, and that was with quite a few projects that we had budgeted above other projects in the past. For example, in 2019, we're at 2.4. In 2023, we're proposing almost $3.2 million transferring out of general fund for park and recreation. Transfer out to the lake, the only thing that's in there is the $1 million for the jetty match, as well as the debt service payment that we've been making, the portion of the debt service payment. To airport. Now, go ahead.
What about the design for the dredge?
That is tied into the SRF application. So you would have to have the application in order to fund the design, because there's no cash in there to fund the design. Does that make sense? So if I were to pull up the lake budget for you, you're not using any cash for the design of the lake. You would only have the cash available to do that project is if your SRF application was submitted or approved, and then you have the cash from that application to pay for the grant.
And at what point, I mean, then we wait and we add that as a supplement to the budget? Is that?
No, I have it budgeted as a revenue item. It's just budgeted not from the general fund. It's budgeted from SRF revenue. Does that make better
Yes.
sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Another one that's different is a transfer out to airport. Now, that is an enterprise fund, and we don't typically budget transfers out. This year, we budgeted $75,000. Next year, this budget requires us to transfer $94,881. So almost $100,000 out to the airport. Transfers out to the Corn Palace. Nope, that's the wrong way. Let's see.
Can you tell us where you are? Are you still on that same page?
Yep.
Top of page 14. She's going through the individual
Oh,
lines.
got
Yep.
it. Okay.
We have $154,637 going from general fund to support the Corn Palace. This year, it was $126,723. So we went up $30,000 there. For E911, we did increase, well, we're at $300,000 from general fund again. We were that in 2022. Prior to that, we were 421, but we've reduced that spending down their ARPA money. Transfer out to EMS, this is one that I think council would probably just at least want to be made aware of. Our 2022 budget anticipates $872,190 coming from general fund to support our ambulance service. Next year, that's going to be $902,000. On the very far right. Look on the very far right, that's your budget.
Okay, I will listen.
Okay. Transfer out to transfer out to EMS then, like I said, is going up to $902,000.
The far right blue,
Yeah, I see
blue
that.
at the top.
So, example, last year, our transfer out budget was $4,595,000. This year, we're proposing $5.7 million, almost $6 million in transfers out. Back in 2020, our transfers out were $4.3 million, 4.8 in 2021, and 5.1 in 2022. 2022 is a little bit different because we did transfer money out for the turf project as well as the ambulance money, the $225 for the 2 ambulances. So that kind of brought that one up. But I just want to point that out because we're using $5.7 million of general fund money to subsidize our other funds. So any reductions obviously makes that less available as well. That's the real general overview, and I can start answering questions if you'd like. See if I can get my computer to work.
I have a quick question on the insurance fund. Remember we had,
Yep,
how much money do we have stuck in that fund?
right now.
Yeah.
I don't
quite a
have the
bit.
balance in front of me right now. What I do know is we grew beyond what our estimated target was. Our target was to be $3 million. Actually, Liz just handed to me before the meeting our estimate for next year, so I'll have a chance to go through that next week and have a better answer. We do not anticipate increasing rates for either employees or for the city next year, just because our fund balance grew to a level where we wanted it to be. They give us a range every year of this is the minimum we can expect for claims, this is the maximum we can expect for claims. For, I don't know, 3 years, Dan, I think you're on that committee, maybe Kevin too. We were budgeting at the maximum expected claims. When we changed the way we were doing things, we haven't hit that at all, not even close. So we're closer to the lower end. So we're not needing to do a rate increase, but we're probably getting to the point where the health fund could pay back the general fund loan that you did when I first got here. I think there was $300,000 at the general fund loan, that health fund, because it was out of cash.
Yeah, we took it.
Yep, you took it, because you did. So you're definitely to the point that you could repay that back, but I'd have to look at where our expected claims are for next year to know. And of course, you're all aware we did a premium holiday the last 4 months of the year, so that means all of the claims that come in here at the end of the year are going to deplete that fund. So, we'll want to see what that average claim amount is for October, November too, to know where we are. but I'll write that down as one to bring back, Kevin, if you'd like. And you asked for one other one. Oh, the overtime in the fire department. I guess I was asked, or I was told that the council, well, the park department was told that council is approving shelter, or I mean the press box in the park for sports complex. So they had a request for $50,000 in this year's budget. We took that out because they already have it in 22's budget. And if they don't spend it, they can roll it to next year. I've been told it's going to be higher than that. So if you guys have already made that decision that you're funding it, you'll want to know where you're plugging that in. Just know that you have $50,000 set aside this year that we can apply to next year.
Do we have a budget for that? I mean, do we have any idea what the estimate will be on that?
I didn't know we had 50,000.
Yeah.
Council
Put
did.
50 in
Yep.
last year. We set it aside, knowing it was coming, but it didn't come to fruition. Now they're looking at, they need a press box and some other stuff, and they're looking at, Mr. Barrington, you want to go ahead and talk to that?
Yeah, I go. Right now, currently, what they're looking at is the press box, obviously the new roof for the press box, and then a roof that canopies over the current bleacher system. Also, I believe a new scoreboard for Cadwell, and feel free to jump in if I'm not doing something right, Kevin. A new scoreboard for Cadwell, and taking the current scoreboard at Cadwell and moving over to Drakefield to use it over there. And then also taking a look at possibly some shade structures or something along, like so what the area that they serve additional food at, where you were grilling burgers at, if you were there for the Cadwell area. Just some area they need for obviously coverage for safety purposes, let alone shade for those additional events that take place. So the rough estimate that I've heard as of late was roughly around 500,000 it's up to. And obviously they are looking at possibly, once again, I don't want to speak for Mitchell Baseball, but the last thing that I've been negotiating or talk with them is a 50-50 match from the city to them. So looking at roughly 250,000 from the city. So once again, I haven't really had a formal proposal for them, but that's sort of some of the talk that's been going on. So.
Just out of curiosity, this is a project I've followed for a while. Are you planning on having shade structures covering the whole bleacher area or just where they have the most intense?
I believe it's just extending out over the top of the press box, which is up
Yeah.
top of your head, is that 30?
That's what they're talking about, is over the middle of it, where the press box is. So they would incorporate the press box and the new shade structure into one.
And then, so it'd be kind of in the
It
middle.
wouldn't be the whole stadium.
Correct.
Probably about a third, wouldn't you think?
Probably.
I guess the only other capital comment that I would make is that we cut a lot of projects out that are maintenance items that are needed. The underground tank, just because we had cut that 2 previous years, knowing now that we're short 300,000, would be an item on at least staff's wish list, as well as the $800,000 that we cut out for those 2 turning, replacement of those signal lights. And Joe, I might be wrong, but I think they even got hit after the last work session, didn't they? Again? Or was that before?
I believe it was the Sunday before.
Okay, the Sunday before the work session, they got hit yet again. So they're going to need to be replaced. It's a short-term need, not a long-term need.
And what was the thing, did you say just now when I missed it, what the $250,000 to $300,000 increase is?
I'll let Joe talk about it.
It's the ground fuel storage tanks out at the street shop. Basically I believe it's all city vehicles fill up at that location. We're having issues with debris in the bottom of the tanks. So DA&R has told us that they need to be replaced soon. They haven't told us now, but we're getting there.
And that's a $250,000 to $300,000 project?
No.
On top of what we have.
600,000. We budgeted 300,000.
Yes.
We're up
And it's
around
another
550 to
250 to
600.
300,000.
Joe, is that where you put a confinement around it?
Since they're underground, we won't need confinement around. It's more so underground.
It'd be double wall fiberglass tank.
Yep.
But the reason why I bring that specific project up is it's been cut twice to make other budgets balance. So we're to the point where we're going to need to fund it.
So is that the same project that is the fuel system
Yep.
upgrade?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so that went from 300 up to?
6.
6.
I want to say over the last 3 years, it's up 600%, if my math is right.
That wouldn't surprise.
And I only pointed it out because we cut some other things out in order to fund that one, including we were going to put in one of the turning signals, but we prioritized those fuel tanks knowing that they've been cut 2 years in a row to try to balance the budget, and they're going to need to be replaced. It's not a pretty item, a pretty new item we're adding. It's taking care of the infrastructure that we have.
Do you know how much we've used in contingency so far this year?
Yeah, I thought I said that. Maybe, oh, no, I started to.
You started to, and then we
What
started
I'm-
with 844,000.
And what I'm aware of to date is $450,000 committed.
We've committed.
And
450.
we may be short cash in the airport, which would require additional funds. We may be short cash in, what was the other one that we were looking at? Is that the airport? Maybe it's just the airport that we might need to transfer funds over to. So,
About 400, 390.
a little less than 400,000.
394,000.
And we have a few months to go, so I really don't think we should tap into that.
And especially when you look at the way projects are coming in. I mean, just to go over some of this, we have some overtime. We had windows that we had to replace. You had $20,000 that you approved for a curb tender that was over budget. We had a dryer break. We had CDL training that we had to do that was a change in law, federal or state law by the DOT. We have a soccer irrigation pump that went out, a pool heater that went out, a campground water heater that went out. All of these things that were maybe previously capital requests that we said, just wait, and if they fail, we'll have to replace them. Now we have to replace them. So.
I noticed a $75,000 appropriation to Mahi. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we could go through the I could review those quickly if you'd like. Sorry, I had my mic off. Let me just see if I can make this duplicate so I can actually see what I'm doing, okay? This is way easier, sorry. Okay, so I'll just start at the top and I'll go through, if that works. So the first one that we had a new subsidy request from Big Friend, Little Friend in the amount of $55,000, excuse me. The committee recommended that that one not be funded since it was a new request. They would, in order to fund more of the capital for government requests. I don't have this other note in front of me, but I believe, I do got it actually, hold on. Just take me 1 second, sorry.
Did you want this sheet?
I'm pulling it up on my phone so I can read it, but this way I can still see what's on the screen in front of me because that's too small. Oh, do you? Yeah. Thank you. It's just easier to be able to see this report here. So Big Friend, Little Friend, the committee had recommended denying that new request due to it not being previously funded. The fund balance for that entity was reported at $165,747. The next one on the list was Habitat for Humanity. That was a new request in the amount of $15,000. The committee recommended denying that request due to where we were at the budget deficit. We did donate 2 parcels of land to Habitat for them to use on 2 home constructions this year. The next one was Dakota Counseling. The request for $26,250. It was recommended by the committee to be approved at $13,000. Primarily, it was reduced to be closer to what the other public entities are currently funding them at. They did have a cash balance that grew by almost $2 million from 2019 to 2020 and showed a profit of $812,108 in 2020. So that's why that one was reduced. Davidson County Juvenile Detention Alternatives. The committee recommended denying that funding at this time, just not wanting to add any more subsidies due to, again, the budget deficit and where we were. The next one, LifeQuest, the Adjustment Training Center. The request was $9,000. The committee recommended, I don't have that down here.
Yeah, you have it.
Oh, that's right. Okay, sorry. I just wrote it down wrong on here. LifeQuest was reduced down to $8,000. I had it wrong on the sheet, sorry. Just because of the growth in the fund balance.
And they had a growth in their fund balance.
And again, $1 million added to the cash in 2021. Next one was Safe Place of Eastern South Dakota, which used to be the Mitchell Area Safe House is what we called it. That is an increase in funding request, and the committee recommended approving it at their requested level of $20,000 due to the building project that they're currently in the process of funding. The next one, Culture and Recreation Arts Council, that was a new funding request. And the committee recommended denying that request just because it was a new funding request in order to focus on capital and other projects requested by city departments. The next one at CASA, applied at $4,000. The committee recommended denying that and putting it towards other city services. Their fund balance also grew $171,000 in 21, which is larger than the city's subsidy. Exchange Club, it's right in front of me, I forgot. The fireworks, the committee recommended funding that at the level of $10,000, which is the same as their request. They did show that the total cost of their fireworks in 2022 was $17,500. Yeah, right here. Mitchell Prehistoric Indian Village, the request is $19,000. The committee recommended approving at $9,000. It was reduced to $9,000. The application said that they were asking for funds for advertising. The city does pay the CVB to market the city's attractions and don't provide other attractions funding like Discovery Museum and Carnegie Library. They had also made mention in their application that they were bringing in new events. And the committee said if their events bring in overnight guests, they can also apply for SCA funds to market those overnight events.
So if there are people here and we want to discuss some of these major cuts, is this now, or do you want to wait and go through everything?
Typically, you guys have always received the information at the first one, and then you ask what you want to come back to the next one. I did not notify anybody else of the opportunity to speak, so.
Well, and it's only by if we have questions.
Right.
So you don't want.
Nobody should have received this. This is the first time the public is seeing
No, I
that
know, but
information.
I just see, I'm looking out here and they're out there, so.
It's your call. It's your guys' hearing.
We said at the beginning, no discussion, so I'd say we'll do it another day.
Okay?
That'd be my recommendation, but
But before tonight, before we leave, we'll tell them when they can come back. Is that correct?
That's what you've done in the past. The next one, the municipal band, they requested $11,000. The committee recommendation was approving that $11,000. Last year, they included an increase to fund the sound system. The committee kept it what it was because they did actually now form an organization. Before the city they were making copies on the city copy machine, and we were titling their vehicles and stuff like that, and they're no longer doing that. They're doing it all on their own now. So that's why it was recommended to stay at that level.
So they pay our insurance too?
I don't know if we were ever paying their insurance or just their title. Do you know? License? I don't know. I think we were just paying their license. I'm not sure about insurance, but there was just a lot of gray areas. So they are not using city resources for making copies and stuff anymore. They're doing that all on their own. So we've been striving to get to that where they're standing alone, I guess. They have a new director, so that changed some of the way they were doing things. Economic development, the application was $167,000. The recommendation was to fund it at $140,000. That would bring it back to previous levels to offset the cost of adding the administrative coordinator position. MAHI, which is Mitchell Area Housing Incorporated. I always want to say Homes Are Possible, sorry. the application was for $75,000. This one, what the committee had talked about doing is putting $75,000 into that line and then just telling the Mitchell Area Housing Group that if they find those lots, those infill development lots that really are probably a property that the city's going to end up with a nuisance property, they would then come and apply for funding to, or ask for the funding to help remove the house or the structure from that lot. Am I stating that correctly?
And the landfill.
Yeah, and the landfill cost too.
Oh, so this is to offset fees.
In a roundabout way, we'll get the money back.
Right, we're exchanging money, actually, but in all reality, it's, you know, we really want to shy away from having free tipping fees. And so then out at the landfill, because it's just very difficult to try to pick and choose. So it makes sense that, you know, this would allow them potentially 3 in-lot, what do they call it?
Infill lots.
Infill lots, yeah,
Yep.
of obtaining an old house that needs to come down anyway. And so the estimated cost is around 25 to take it down and to take it to the landfill. So this will allow them up to 3. If they don't find any, it doesn't get spent.
Right. It's earmarked, but not handed to them.
So the discussion was it would be a lot better to have it above board and have it out there for the public to see, have the opportunity to comment. Everybody knows that we're setting this money aside. They know what it's being used for versus us just waiving a fee kind of. It's just not a good policy or practice to be in.
So the city doesn't do the work. We've done some of that in the past with homes we demolished, so we're not going to be doing, they're going to be finding their own.
It's my understanding the only ones that we demolished are ones that then we were putting a nuisance assessment against the property. So these are ones that aren't necessarily a nuisance property, but like if something doesn't happen to them, they could be in the future.
What were you saying, Dan?
Sorry.
Schoenfelters did the first house, the block west of Westling. Yeah, so they cleaned it up, and, you know, that's one where the governor's
governor's
house already down.
I don't think we've torn down any Fort Mahi. It's only been
I
one.
think they tore the one down on Foster Street.
Yeah, but we did that as part of a public nuisance.
Right.
And then we assessed that cost back to the property. So we've
The other-
not done any for a private group.
Right. The other ones we did,
It's on Raleigh.
Yep.
the other ones we did were in the floodplain, and it was FEMA.
Yep.
Correct.
So this puts it more in line with that other process. We're not, you know, we're putting it out there that if they have a property, they could come in and get that reimbursement for those fees. Mitchell Main Street and beyond, the application amount was for $38,000. The committee recommended approving it at last year's level, just with their work towards the streetscape as well as the bid district and then the new events that they brought to town. Regional Economic Development, the recommendation was reduce that to $25,000 from $30,000, the previous year's funding. And then the CVB, the application was for $250,000, and then the committee recommended dropping that down to $200,000, again, to help offset some of the costs of that new position transferring to the city. And I'm assuming if we come, one thing that you guys could tell me as a whole is if your next meeting, I can put together that list of discussion items like you've done in previous years to include all the capital requests, all the subsidy requests. I can add in the press box discussion, the additional cost of the gas tanks, and any other items. If you want a presentation on the employee request, I'll bring back the overtime hours for fire. This is the time to throw stuff at me, I guess is what I'm offering you.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that we want to do is look at that, amending that employee at the rec center, that portion is that.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, so that's one that you'd want to bring back.
I'll probably have that and the other two employee requests just included on that list that you guys can go down and discuss all of them.
Yeah. And with the fire, I don't know, Marius, if this would include any transports, but we've always talked about the possibility of us losing revenue with transports. You don't have to answer it now, but if we can kind of tidy all that up, what the grant, how long the grant is, just get the numbers, and then what our overtime is, like we talked about, so we can kind of just look at some solid numbers and see
Yep.
if there's a potential of additional revenue or less expense.
Right. We'd also like to show you how it reduces the number of calls where we were less than the minimum staffing. So we've had times where there's one guy left in the station, and we get a call for an ambulance, and they don't know what they're going to do next. And that's what we're hearing, the greatest concern from employees that came up. Maris has been screaming that for probably 3 years now, but it also was a huge concern that the firefighters brought to us during negotiations, is that there's times when there's 1 or 2 guys left in the station and they get a call. What are they going to do? Because no one's coming in.
And then the community service, actually discussing with Jessica on the way in with the article that was in the paper about the lack of taxi cab and the fact that it's really leaning on the city now. So maybe some additional information on the grant, and we've got the increased revenue potentially of 25, so pretty close to what the 2 part-time, but maybe just a little more additional information on that. Is this a one-time grant, or can we continue to apply, or how?
And here's what we estimated for the revenue offset for those 2 positions would be $43,000. Does that sound right, Jessica? Yep. So we did go through and try to figure that out. It's actually a better cost cover doing it this way than it was the full-time employee. We get more of that back. The issue that we have is we can't, those times that we receive the complaints about no one being available are the times that our current part-timers or full-timers don't want to work, right? Don't want to take those. Jessica, you can just come on. Here, you can even have your own little, sorry.
So with the 2 part-time positions versus a 1 full-time, we're able to cover closer to the 60 hours versus 80. So we're able to work longer into the 8 p.m. time frame versus right now we close at 6. And we're hoping to reopen on Sundays as well, so that way we can cover that service. And these part-time positions would cover, you'd work on your 10-hour days on Saturdays and Sundays, and then our mornings are getting really busy, especially at 5:30, because we have people going to dialysis at the same time as well as work. And dialysis. Yep. So they're going to both dialysis and work, and 1 vehicle that we're currently operating with is not able to get everybody to work at 6 o'clock and to dialysis at 6 o'clock. So everybody has to be there at the exact same time. So we're hoping with basically getting the 2 part-time positions, we'll be able to get 2 vehicles on the road during that time to get everybody where they need to be. Our workforce transportation has it's just blowing up. Everybody needs to get to work, and they have no way to get there.
One of the things that we talked about too is we're hoping by having this position be one that's more than 20 hours a week but less than 30. They won't qualify for health insurance, but they do qualify for South Dakota retirement. We're thinking it might be a secondary job for someone who's already on the system, because then it just adds to what their final benefit payout is. So someone could really grow their retirement by working this in addition to what they do full-time for a different employer.
And when you're asking about the grant, that is our annual operating grant that we put that in. So it comes back every year.
And then maybe come back with the ridership, like you had visited with me tonight already, of how it's just exploded, and it just obviously identifies the lack of taxi cab drivers that we have in town.
And I guess the other way to look at it too is if this was a part-time position or 2 part-time positions versus the 1 full-time, if in a year or 2 from now we have 2 new taxi companies open up, we can dial those back down because they're not a regular full-time position that is a lot more difficult for the city to eliminate than more of a regular part-time position.
So Jessica, I assume that the revenues, if your ridership has increased so
Dramatically.
that I assume your revenues have as well?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's where we came up with the guesstimate, because rides can be either $2 all the way up to $20, depending on if it's Medicaid or if it's a pre-scheduled ride. So we did a guesstimate on those additional hours we'll be able to operate, and our guesstimate was that $25,000 a year. Just on same-day rides alone, since this started in July, mid-July, we've given over 145 same-day rides.
I guess I would just tell council to make sure that you're looking at the revenue for those, because here's your revenue for the past 3 years where we're saying it's up. I think you compared it to 2018, right, Jessica?
Correct.
So 2019, that's where the level is that we're at right now. So 2019, we had 103,000. Here we were at 53,000. Here we're at 86,000. Year-to-date, we're at 84, and that was as of the end of July. We're budgeted at 105. So, we got to take everything into perspective and make sure that we're comparing apples to apples.
It might be helpful, that sheet that I had during budget might be helpful to get to everybody.
And we'll also bring in those actual year-to-date revenues and expenses for you to look at as well.
I mean, I'm just curious, if we have a problem with getting transports, do you guys ever work together in tandem to help with some of those things? I know that you're right now taxed to your limit, but it just occurs to me that you're kind of in the same business, and do we need to add a vehicle? Is it something that the revenues would be enough to finance it?
You mean their ambulance transports or what?
Yeah, well, they have any.
Yeah, we don't do anything, we do discharges from the hospital. We don't do anything to the emergency room. We go to the hospital, but not to the emergency
So like if
services, but we
someone
do
needed to go
discharges.
to a doctor's appointment,
They do
do you
those.
do that?
Yep,
If it's to Sioux
all the
Falls?
time, yep.
To Sioux Falls?
Not to Sioux Falls. If they go to Sioux Falls, we have a statewide coordination plan where we have to work with the other transit agencies in the state. And since River City's out of here and People's Transit out of Huron both come through Mitchell to Sioux Falls, we line them up with them. So that way we're not duplicating services.
Yeah, because sometimes, it's not always an emergency, but it's
Correct.
sometimes it's just, okay.
I got a quick question, too. I've been asked, would it be profitable if we had a bus running on a Friday, Saturday, just a Friday, Saturday night, being there's nobody else out there on the weekends?
Finding employees is the hard part.
What we struggle with now is getting people to want to work those weekend hour
Right.
shifts.
That's why we're not open on the weekends, because we can't find anybody that wants to work on the weekends.
Well, late at night buses are also an issue because there were a lot of altercations that required service officers to recognize.
Yeah, our biggest struggle is right now finding employees, and we're down 2 full-time employees right now.
Really?
Well, we got you driving.
Yeah, and I'm driving. I left at 5 o'clock today, and our
going around the
dispatcher
roads
was
like a
there
hide.
still scheduling 60, trying to figure out how to fit 64-mile rides on our bus.
We don't have Uber and Lyft here.
No.
Nope.
Well, they have
They all went away during the pandemic.
right, Lyft still has a current license, but there's no drivers here. They apply for that, whatever, the blanket permit that they do, yeah.
The only taxi in town currently is Speed's. And you know how, or what we're hearing about them, so. Speedy. The only one. Well, the other taxi went to work for her as a driver.
So even during the day, that's our only.
That's the only taxi service at all in Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yep, they're all done.
And our drivers are taxed.
Yeah. What other questions or items are you wanting more information on for the next session? Do you want to maybe look at the meeting dates and have me contact subsidies, or?
I think another thing on the subsidies that's good to know, remember, we had that speaker at the SEA meeting that told us when people get to be cash flush and making money, that's a good time to, Jeff was there, Dan was there, Stephanie was there, the mayor was there. That's kind of what we base a lot of stuff on too, is when the revenue keeps going, when their cash and bank keeps getting more and more.
Especially when the cash that they're adding on an annual basis is more than the subsidy that they're getting from the city. That's a time to start looking at backing that subsidy back down, because every year you're turning down city requests for capital and projects, but you're funding other ones that are adding that cash to their reserves. And should the taxpayers' money go into somebody else's cash reserves, or should it go into a project that we've had to cut? Not a fun statement to say, but I mean, it's the reality of the situation when,
Well, and we put a lot, that's what we talked about too,
Yep.
and we did that. What they had in the bank and how it goes up every year.
So if we've got a few questions on the capital expenditures.
we can go through those now.
Well, it doesn't matter, but funnel them through you
Yep.
so they can collect the information and then come back.
Yep, and then I could include that as part of a summary. If we have more time before the next meeting, I could do the big narrative like I've done in the past that does the comparisons from, one year to the next that you guys are used to seeing.
And what would that be, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I couldn't have it for you Monday, I can tell you that. But if you wanted to look at either the 26th or the October 3rd, 26th, I could definitely have whatever questions council sends back, we could have information put together, and that's not a regular council meeting.
Regular council meeting, so I don't think you want to go early for that. It's up to you guys, I guess.
I
Yeah.
happen to be gone that next week.
Oh, okay.
The
What, the
19th.
Vikings on Monday Night Football?
The 26th, if you wanted to do that, that's not a council meeting, so you could set aside, a good 2 hours, have all your questions posed to me by the end of the week, or even Monday of the next week, we'll get all those answers put together. I could do an invite to subsidies, not that they're all going to speak, but if you have questions, or if they have questions or information, you could have your back and forth then. Did someone say they're not here the 26th, though?
No, the 19th,
Okay.
I am not. I will be around the 26th.
What do you guys think of that?
I think let's target the 26th
Yeah.
for our questions and stuff to get back to you, and we can put all that stuff up
It's a Monday.
on Monday. Because I want to go through and
Yeah, this is the first time you guys are getting that, and the public needs to be aware of that too, that we just finished this review with department heads on Friday, trying to get to where we could present to council a structurally balanced budget. So you guys have had little to no time to do any kind of a deep dive into this. It's the first time anyone in the public is hearing this. If I get those questions from you, then I could do the full narrative. We could have that posted for the next work session, so the general public can see what's included and what isn't, and go from there.
Does 5:30 work like tonight? Or do you want to do it at 5:30 or 6?
I go when and where you tell me to.
26th.
Regular meeting is 6, just like all of us.
The
I
what?
think it'll take too long.
We don't have a meeting the 26th? Yeah.
You're not around.
So we figured
I will,
You can still go.
Or, I guess, or you could set another, or do you want to push it off to another?
we could look at another date. No,
Actually, the first week in August.
August?
Or October is the state high school golf tournament, so that's 3 days I'm out there, so let's just do that. Jeffrey, you were on that 20, whatever that
The
is.
19th.
No.
He's,
I can make 26 work.
Are you back the 27th? You could go the end of the week.
well, what I like about I don't know if everyone's still on the 26th or if you switch to a different date, but if you do it the 26th, that gives time for any direction you guys give, that if you want to have a short session before that meeting in October, we could still get that scheduled.
I'll make the 26 work.
Are you sure?
Could you do the 22nd?
That's not giving
That
you.
might push it.
Yeah, Stephanie needs a
I need some time.
All right.
I don't want to be here till 9:30.
of this week, okay.
One late night Friday is enough for me, if we,
Okay.
Okay.
5 or 5:30, what are we?
5:30?
okay.
Sorry, Dan, I tried.
And then at that time, I will have the overview published with the work session to give, so everyone's aware of it. I will let not department heads, well, department heads will know too, but subsidy applications will also know that there may be questions posed at that meeting as well. Does that sound like correct? And then council, you're going to send me any questions or additional information that you need that you want me to have prepared for that meeting as well, correct?
You know, I've run over there.
Yep, and I'll do your discussion list like I have in the past. It'll have all the capital projects plus anything else you guys throw on there. I'll do the ones that we noted tonight, the employee requests and the subsidy requests, and that will be a running list that I can send out to all of you as well.
Just one thing I want to bring up amongst the council is, obviously, I know we brought up the baseball project, and the other one that's been talked about a little bit, well, quite a bit, is the golf, the second phase. What is some of the latest discussion from, I guess, golf board or whatever it is? I mean, has there been any discussion lately on phase 2?
I can show you the request that was in the budget.
It's not in our budget.
It's not included because of needing to balance, and it was an enterprise fund. I'll show you what is included here. And just a point of, I guess, another thing to point out. So there is currently only, they have $65,000 budgeted, which is, they pay that amount every year for 5 years to replace a whole bunch of equipment. They also have the total request needed to do phase 2. Why am I looking up there instead of here? Sorry, it's $573,000. The only
2 years, is there any inflation built on that?
I have no idea. Okay.
What was that, Daniel?
Any inflation built in there? Yes. There is.
And the only amount that's left in there is $22,000. And then the other item that was added in is the repayment of the golf carts at $100,000. So, of course, what you guys talked about last year, or what you will probably say this year, is you could always not have them repay that this year and put it towards the master plan, which would give them $122,000. The other thing is we were being really conservative estimating what their fund balance was going to be. Let me pull this up here quick. And I'll put these items that maybe Marty as part of that discussion too. Oh my goodness, hold on.
One thing about phase 2, phase 1, everything we're spending there, whatever it was, 146,000 is all work setting up phase 2. Widen the fairways for that, the tree taken out is all, we don't need trees taken out if we're not going to do phase 2. The tee box is set up, they'll be set up different, so, I mean, hopefully they get some of this done right after the state high school, which was already booked, and they'll get a lot of the phase 2 done starting in, in October, November, and we have a nice winter. Phase 1 done. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Phase 1. And then, and then phase 2, the whole thing goes together. You can't do part of it. It isn't like hey, let's do this half and this half. So it's either got to be all or nothing, because when you make a new green on 11, it takes 12 out of play. So you take 12 out of play, you got to have a new par 3 over by 15, and then 15 you make a par 4 straight in. So there's no way you can cut anything out. So it's I think they added, might be able to help me out here, I think they added 15% on inflation, whether that's right. Also, if golf course designers need work, naturally the bid comes in more competitive. Because I can't imagine any new golf courses going up right now, but.
So is there money that the golf course will pay from their enterprise fund?
That's what I was just going to show you. So right now, we have anticipated that they're applying $95,000 from cash. This is a conservative estimate that even after that $95,000 applied, they might still have $115,000 left. So that's additional money that they could put towards that phase 2 if needed.
You may have to sit down and have a serious discussion as to whether this remains an enterprise fund or not, because we're continually putting money into it.
Right. This and the Corn Palace.
No.
This and the Corn Palace.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's a discussion we may have to have.
So should that be a discussion for 23?
Probably wouldn't hurt
What's that?
to have that discussion about the enterprise fund.
Starting as of January 1st, 23.
How many enterprise funds do we have?
They're right here, they're the ones that would be on yellow on your fund overview sheet. So water, wastewater, airport, sanitation, courthouse, golf course, campground, and EMS. EMS is not there yet, courthouse is not, golf course is not, and apparently the airport is not. It might come around, because sometimes, the weird thing about the airport, well, the weird thing about the airport is
Money
that
shows up.
we always think we're going to go in the hole with the airport, and then they get random grant money that comes in, so it always ends up working out in the end. But we do have to pass our budget anticipating that it's not going to work out in the end. So,
Can we still keep it as a separate department so we can monitor
Yes.
the revenue and expenses?
and I guess just for council's information, Michelle and I and the mayor had conversations about that, and Michelle was going to pose it to the auditors when they come. I know the Corn Palace has been brought to us on several occasions that we should consider not having that as an enterprise fund.
Right, that's what drives it.
Yeah, because it never cash flows. I mean, we're getting $340,000 from entertainment tax and $150 from general fund. It's not cash flowing. The thing that's different about the enterprise fund versus a special revenue fund like Park and Rec, special revenue fund, they're held, I guess, for a better way of, it's more of like budgeting purposes. Enterprise fund, all we care about is revenue and expenditures and that you have the cash available. Now, by policy, we still say you have to stay within your budgeted amounts. But if something breaks at the Corn Palace, the mayor and I could say, okay, go ahead and move forward. With the special revenue funds, they cannot do that. They have to come in and ask permission for any changes above that because it's more strictly adhered to, I guess, with the budgeting principles. Is that a good way to layman's it? Okay. So we're going to pose that question to auditors anyways, especially for the Corn Palace, because that has been brought to us several times. EMS has only been a special enterprise fund for a couple of years. Longer story short, but we are looking at the revenue and trying to make sure that we're collecting in the way that we thought we were going to be with the online billing. I think it's a little bit early or premature maybe to look at changing that quite yet.
Is this the second year?
Third? Yeah, so this will be the third.
Second full.
Right. 22 is though, but 23 will be our third year. Yeah. And the one thing that is good that I don't remember if we kept that in or not, Marius, in his budget. Yeah, we did. They have to do a study on their costs and billing that goes back to Medicaid, Medicare, which is good. Hopefully, and like everybody's having to do that gets Medicare, Medicaid. Hopefully what we're hoping is that will result in those payments going up for us because they are a significant portion of our clientele or our runs, but the revenue doesn't really increase as these costs have went up. So they are looking at that. We're having a group that comes in and we'll put all that data together to report back to them. Does that sound right, Mary?
Yep.
Okay. Have to make sure I'm,
No, sounds
okay. So we could have that discussion a little bit too on those enterprise funds if you'd
Mr.
like.
Costa, you got away pretty easy tonight.
There's always the next meeting.
Yeah, we're saving it for the next one. And then I guess just to echo what Kevin said at the beginning, or Councilor Kevin McCardle said, the council, the mayor and council, the mayor knows he sat in on the meetings, but the council should really feel assured that your department heads come into this asking for what are the bare minimums that they need and where are our priorities. It makes it more difficult to balance the budget because there isn't really anywhere for me to go to anymore and take things out. Now it's really, we're just making requests for actual needs. There's very little wants in this budget at all, if any. Most of it is, how do we maintain what we have? How do we look at our long-term replacement schedule of the equipment that we have? Nobody's asking to build the new, greatest, latest, best thing. It's really just focusing on what we're here to do as core government services. So they do are owed some, applause or accolades for doing a good job on the requests that came in and doing a good job prioritizing as well.
Stephanie, quick question. I know the answer after sitting here for 16 years, but I'm just going to ask more for just statement-wise.
Sure.
So if the council would come back and say, hey, we want to do phase 2 of the golf course, we want to do, work with Mitchell Baseball on doing it, and just, these are all just want to. My question to you is, where would the council find this money?
Cutting something else.
Okay.
Or,
It won't come from contingency because
Yeah.
that would use it all.
I would really hesitate about reducing contingency too much just with the way our budget, with projects coming in. I guess you could look at that future capital projects fund if you want. I had suggested that you use that for a debt payment service, or the debt service payment over a period of years, but you have to reduce one to fund the other. We will take another look at revenue now that we've got the growth numbers back. That might add to some ability, and we're close to the end. So we should have September's, at least we'll have the first half of September's collection. So if our sales tax is still where we have been most of the year, I could maybe look at adding some more sales tax into the revenue budget projections too, but I'm not going to want to go beyond where I think we can realistically achieve, because then what happens next year if you don't hit it? Now you're spending your reserves to balance your operational budget.
And I think that one of the things we have to think about is the lake. I mean, that we've got the money, the debt service, if we proceed with the lake, so.
Yeah, and the good thing with, well, not the good thing with the lake, usually when we're financing projects, so if we're doing construction in 2022 and in 2023, this is 22, sorry, 2023 and 2024, your debt service is probably going to start in 24 or 25. So you've got that interim period in the beginning to get going. I could go over with you at the next meeting too, where we're looking at with our other constitutional debt that's coming off. I had someone ask me that question. Well, and we're fine with the numbers because all of our TIFs that we've approved recently, I'll pull this up for it. Yep. Oh, look, it came right up. That's awesome. Is this really too small down on the TV too?
No.
Oh, whoops. Okay. So we do have some of these that are going to be paying off. You'll see here, well, the near lake property, that's not really. But 2032 is when your community project bonds come off. Now, that might seem like it's a long ways away, but if we're talking a debt service payment not starting until 2024 or 2025, that's not as far away as you think. And right now, we're paying $847,500 every year on that debt service. So that rolls off in 2032. This one, we're paying $200,000 out of it, well, $113,000 out of the general fund towards this now. So that's paid off in 2029. When that's paid off, you could commit that towards another debt service payment. The rest of those are really utility accounts, so none of that's going to reduce any general fund obligation. So
If we keep, we're up, sales tax up 8% roughly right now on the year.
that's where we were the last time, was like 8.2, I think. Or,
And then let's say it stays at 8%. How much money are we talking about? Extra?
I would have to look. I think right now I budgeted a $400,000 increase from last year's level. I just have to put it together.
So
maybe we
if it ends up 8% over, where does that money go? Because it's over and
So what
it's in this year's
happens-
budget.
The thing to keep in mind is that that's one portion of our overall revenue budget. And so at the end of the year, when we're looking at supplements the next year, part of that I look at is the revenue that we received that was above budget. So we might exceed on sales tax, but we might be really low on some of the permits or fees that we budgeted. So you can't just single out sales tax. You have to look at the cumulative revenue budget so you ensure you're not going into reserves. So what we've done in the past is at the end of the year, when we're doing those supplemental appropriations, we look at what's remaining for revenue above expenditures after we're doing all the supplements. That's how you've grown that. This is not all just from ARPA, guys, because you've already spent $500,000 on turf. We spent $200,000 on doing the air filter stuff. We've spent $225,000 on the ambulance replacements, and some of our ARPA money went into those funds that the wages were being paid out of. So what we do is at the end of the year, after we've seen the total revenue that came in and the total expenditures, if we had excess revenue above what we thought, we've been dedicating it into this capital improvement fund. That's where it goes. It's been right here, earmarked. So that's why, before you didn't have that. We had about 11% reserves, or less than 11% when I came here, and our goal has always been to be at 25 to 30%. If we're above 30%, that's when I'm recommending that you designate that for future capital projects.
Last year, we're plus or minus, what was the ending number, roughly?
I gotta look.
Michelle, you're doing your math in your head, I can see this. I can see this little smoke.
Oh, you know what it is? Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna show you the overview that I gave to you this year when we did the supplemental appropriations. Oh my gosh. Remember how Justin told me how to do that and I can't figure it out? Yeah, I know. So here we had our revenue minus expenditures in 2021. We were $5 million more in revenue. We had to take out our restricted revenue and what we had committed in budget. So we had $2 million of revenue available for 2022. Of that, we had 1.2 that had to be supplemented into the next year. So we added $950,000 into your future capital projects funds to use for projects that come up in the future, not for balancing operations, but for more of a capital request.
We did that in December.
No, it would have been in March, because it's after she closes out the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After she closed the books for, okay.
I was trying to see if I had a date on here. I didn't. But it's after they close out the books for the year. So it takes her a little bit of time to get all the adjustments made and the, I don't know, whatever, the annual report finalized and everything that Michelle does. It's really hard accounting stuff that I don't know. So.
And then keep going on that, so then there's that $2.5 million that Dan was asking about.
Future capital projects, yeah, that's what we designated towards future, and part of this is because we did not designate in 2020, because that was still kind of during the COVID ifs, and we didn't know what was going to happen in 2021. So I didn't ask you to do anything in 2020. I wanted to know really where we were ending when things got a little bit back to normal. So what you're seeing here on these designations are probably more than we would normally do, because it was like 2 to 3 years, whatever that COVID span was in there. But really, this is what you need to look at for how 2021 ended, is these top two. Does that make sense? Okay. And that's honestly where you took money out for the turf. When you did the turf, you replaced the ice compressors at the ice arena, or I said the wrong word. It's not ice compressors, it's the coolant system. Yeah, the ambulance, we did the ambulance out of that process. We replaced the purification system out of that process. So it's working well. You're spending money that you have in hand versus hoping you get the revenue and then spending it before you have it, if that makes sense. And it's just designated, so it's not counted on as money we can use. Right, it's designated for your capital project request that you have. $1 million we designated for the jetty, which we show that going into next year's construction. Does that answer? I don't even remember who asked the question. Okay, does that answer your question, Dan? Sorry.
They got 3 or 4 different areas, you get all 3 or 4.
Oh, hey, look at that, I'm getting better. That's good.
She got all of them.
Yeah.
So, although it maybe seems cumbersome, it is a very conservative way that you're addressing that by making sure that you have the cash in hand before you're spending it. What other questions?
Anything else?
So we'll email you whatever.
Yes, any additional detail or clarification or presentation requests, if you could have those to me even by Monday, because you'll probably hear from people over the weekend. I will set the next meeting for the 26th at 5:30. I'll let subsidies know that they're going to be that subsidy applications will be discussed, so they can be there to answer questions. We'll have the list of information as well as anything else you ask me ready to go. Does that sound right? Okay.
Then we'll be adjourned.